this was the best part of the book for me. I loved these early prison stories and how you dealt with that at such a young age. And there was one part where you mentioned, you were almost under the threat of, or you thought you may be under the threat of the death penalty at one point. I can't imagine the emotions that go through someone's head at that point. How did you even begin to process that possibility when you first thought that?
You know what? When I was sitting in the hole, I remembered a movie. I forget it. Angels with Dirty Faces. I forget the name of it, but it was a East Side Kids. It was about a gang in New York, and they were like these little gangsters, and they had a hero in the neighborhood. There was a tough guy. He was going to the chair, and they were all talking about he'll spit in their eye, and he'll say, "Come and get me, coppers." And then Pat O'Brien has to come and tell him, "Nah." He went out like a little bitch. He was screaming, yelling, pissed his pants. And I remember just asking God, if I have to die, please let me go with dignity. Let me die with dignity. Don't let me, I will say your name. I've made a deal. I'll say your name every day, and I'll do whatever I can for my fellow inmate. I remember saying inmate because I thought I was never getting out of jail. And by the grace of God, there was a DA reject. The DA rejected it, went to Sacramento, and they looked at the case and threw it out because the witnesses all said, your mother did it. I saw your dad come over and hit him with a hatchet or whatever. Those big stories. The DA rejected it and said, let the prison take care of it. So that was Cinco de Mayo, 1968. When I got out of the hole, I started saying God's name every day and doing whatever I can for my fellow inmate. And August 23rd, 1969, Mad Dog Madden, the parole agent that was on the parole board, said, we're going to give you a chance to spread your wings, Trejo. Give us back a life sentence. Bring us a life sentence so we don't have to deal with you anymore. In other words, we're kicking you out so you can bring back a life sentence so we don't have to play this game with you. I fooled him. I never looked back. I got out August 23rd, 1969, and I've never looked back. I've never stopped saying God's name, and I've never stopped doing whatever I can for my fellow man and inmate.
A lot of people look at you and they think, GSP, he's the man, he's the baddest man on the planet. No one can touch him. But you were actually bullied as a child, right?
Yeah, I had a lot of problems when I was at school. I'm from the countryside. I'm not from a city. I'm from a countryside. So I used to go in a school in a small community, and they used to have a lot of the kids. They had a special program. They were called TGA. Like it's an abbreviation. It's for a kid, delinquent teenager that didn't made it to the next grade. They had to redo maybe twice the same grade, twice or three times the same grade. So they were much older than the kids. And they were in my school, and I used to have a lot of problems with these kids, and they used to bully me. So a lot of time when I was at school, and instead of thinking of and focusing on what the teacher was saying in front of the class, I was focusing on how am I gonna get my books in my locker, then run to the bus before I get caught by the bully. Because most of my friends, they were intellectual guys. I'm an intellectual person myself, but I was an athlete. I've always been good in sport, which made me have problems with the guys in the school because I was good in sport, so and I was hanging out with the intellect people, with not the cool group of people. So it made me a real target. Plus, I don't have any brothers, cousins that could defend me. I was by myself, and I always defend my friend who had problems, my intellectual friend who had problems. I always defend them. I always got their back, which was not the other way around. And it frustrated me because when I was young, it frustrated me because I felt that when they were in trouble, I was there for them. But when I was in trouble, they were not there. And then it made me realize that courage, there's different form of courage. I'm myself courageous to go fight. You know, that's who I am. I'm a warrior in spirit. But my friends that were more intellectual, they might not be courageous to go fight, but when it's time to tell the truth to someone, which I'm not courageous, sometimes I have to lie, I have to be to please people. I don't have the courage to tell them the truth. But my friend, they're courageous in that part of our friendship. So I got a lot of problem with bullying. And when you hang out with not cool people, you're not a cool person. So it was a very different time than what I am right now. And I believe the fact that I got bullied when I was young, all the mind game, the intimidation helped me. It was negative at the time, but it turns out to be a big positive weapon later on in my life, especially in the fight sport that I gravitate, because there's a lot of mental warfare in combat sport. And a lot of guys, they try to intimidate me, try to make me fight in a way that is not efficient, with more emotion. And I believe because I was victim of bullying when I was young, I'm able to control myself way better nowadays, and to deal with the intimidation with the bullying that I face and fighting. It's nothing for me. It's a joke because I'm used to be bullied by guys that I know they are gonna kick my ass because they're 3 older and bigger guys than me, and now fighting only one guy in a fight in a cage with a referee that is that I believe I'm gonna be beating him. It's nothing for me. So I believe it turns out to be a positive thing. So bullying, it's a good thing for me right now.
And man, years down the line, you mentioned that, you actually ran into one of these guys who'd fallen on hard times, and you managed to let go of all that resentment, and you actually ended up giving him some money, man. What was it about you that just thought, I'm gonna let this go?
Yeah, there were a guy that used to. It was many guys that was beating me. Many guys. Like I can tell you so many stories. Like I got spit on, and in Canada, the advantage that we have, like I can't complain because, in Canada, where I grew up, there were no weapon. You get a beating. It's the good old beating. Maybe there are 2-3 guys, but you get a beating. There's no knife, nothing. In my days when I was young, it was no knife. It was a good old beating. When you fight a guy, you fight. Then after you move on, it's finished. Maybe after you have to fight his cousin or his friend, blah blah blah. But it's no weapon. That's why I don't try to say that I'm an expert in bullying, because now time has changed. With the social media and everything. But there were a guy. He used to beat me in the bus. He was like 3 years older than me. And when you're young, when you're like 9 years old and the guy is 12 years old, is a big difference than when you're, for example, 25 and 28. Because one is still a kid, the other one is a teenager. It's a big difference in terms of strength and everything. So one of the kid was beating me in the bus, and he was stronger than me. I couldn't get the advantage. He was better than me. And I made one mistake one time. I told my dad about what happened, because I always came back with scratches and stuff. And my dad, he grabbed me. He said, "Listen, you're gonna tell me what's gonna happen now." And he took me on the wall. He said, "Tell me what happened." And I told him, I said, "Listen, he's a kid in the bus. I'm not gonna say his name, but yeah, he's better than me." And my dad did the unthinkable. He he went he found out where the kid lives. He went to the house of the kid. Talked to his dad. He said, "Listen, can you tell your kid to stop beating my kids up in the bus, because my kid need to focus on school?" And the next morning I go back in the bus, and the first thing he does is say, "Oh, you went to cry to your daddy?" And then I got so angry because I'm a very proud person. I ran to him, bang, 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 get into a fight in the bus. It was a disaster. But just to tell you that I remember that my dad told me that when he went to see that kid who beat me up, he says that when he got there, he knocked at the door and his dad opened the door. He felt a very bad atmosphere in the house. We know now that this kid doesn't only live with his father, and his father was an alcoholic who beat him up. So in a way, I don't hold any grudge towards that person, because I was just a collateral damage. The way he learned how to communicate from his dad, it's the same way he communicate with me. So I feel actually bad for him. And this kid, one time I was like, quite recently, I was in the corner street, and someone knocked at my door begging for money, and that was him. That was him. I opened the window and he looked at me and he saw me with his eyes. He recognized me. And I could see his jaw dropping. He was like, holy shit, you know, like. And then I say, I'm gonna park my car. I parked my car, and I could see in his body language he was scared that I would beat him up, but I didn't want to do that. I asked him, I said, hey, what's going on? He said, oh, things are not going well and stuff. I said, listen, I gave him everything I had in my, like I had maybe, like, I don't know, like $60, $70. I gave him, I said, listen, man, I remember you when you were young. Everybody wanted to be like you. You were cool, you were tall, you were like the man, you were the coolest guy almost in our school. And now look at you begging for money. Where is your pride? You know what I mean? You can achieve everything you want in life, you know? Like, get out of here. I don't ever want to see you here. I kind of threatened him. I said, I don't ever want to see you here. And then our paths separate. What happened is a few weeks after that incident, my parent told me that, because I'm from a very small town. Everybody knows everybody where I'm from. That same guy, he came, knocked at my parents' house door to talk to me. And my parents said, George doesn't live there anymore. And they say, oh, I just want to say that George gave me kind of a pep talk, and now I have a job, everything goes well. And so it made me feel much better, that, like, make me feel like a revenge, so to speak. Much better than if I would have seen him and beat him up for what he did to me when I was young. So it made me feel very good. And it's a true story. Like, it looks like a Hollywood scenario movie, but it's a really true story. And I'm very happy about that.
Why don't diets work?
Yeah, why don't diets work? Okay, so this is a big topic. So let's give the 30,000-foot view first.
Sure.
Of course, some people will go on a particular diet and find an improvement. Right, so when we say that most diets don't work, what we mean is the research is quite clear that in terms of that it shows for most people in the long term, diets don't work. And I say to people, right, every January, it's a cliche that new weight loss books are going to come out. I get it. I'm part of that cliche, right? Because I'm releasing this book and it comes out in the new year. But I would like to think, and I would bet, that it is different from every other weight loss book that's going to come out in January. Now, I could be wrong. I hope there are more like it. But from what I can see so far, there aren't. Now, when we say diets don't work, I passionately believe that if you are someone who's trying to improve your health, you can go into your supermarket or onto Amazon or wherever you buy books and pick up any book. And if you follow the plan for 2 or 3 weeks, you're probably going to feel better. You know, because there's a lot of restriction, there's a lot of deprivation, there's a lot of, you know, can you drop a dress size in 2 weeks? Yeah. But you know what? From seeing patients over 20 years, I'm not convinced that anyone really wants that. Because most people who have success on a short-term diet, most people, not all, I will say, by March, they're not only back to where they were, they're worse off than where they were. Yeah. So it worked in January when they're raving about this diet. Oh my God, this diet's phenomenal. You've got to get this. You've got, it's like the secret of the diet book industry, right? By the time you figure out that actually a few months down the line that it's not working so well, it's already been a big bestseller and it's made back at its advance and it's done really well, right? And I say that not with condemnation and judgment, I've just observed that over and over again, because I see the patients who come in March and April, who tell me what happened in January, and I see where they're up to, and not only is their weight up and their health worse off, but they've damaged their self-esteem. They feel like failures. They blame themselves. It's the only industry where if something doesn't work, we blame us. We don't blame the diets. We don't say that's the wrong approach to me. We're like, no, we're failures. And that's why I start the book. The introduction, I'd like to think, is very powerful, where I go, this is not your fault, right? I explain, you're not weak. You don't have a lack of willpower. You are living in an obesogenic environment. You're living in an environment where everything around you is pushing you to put on weight. It's not about willpower. You could take hunter-gatherer ancestors who are trim and put them in 2020 or 2021. I reckon 60, 70% of them would become overweight, because we didn't suddenly become weak and lacking willpower in the 1980s when obesity rates started going up. No, the world around us changed. Now, I don't want that to be powerless for people, right? I get it. It's a hard environment. It would be much easier if the environment around us made the healthy choice the easy choice. And I advocate for system change with that, but that's going to take time. And I think we can also help people understand the little things they can do to make their own environment work for them. So, you know, I don't know, do you know the Whole30 diet?
I don't. I'm not sure I do.
It's massive in America. It's one of the first paleo type diets. And one of the co-authors, Dallas Hartwig, is a really good friend of mine. He's no longer with the Whole30 because there's many reasons. I don't want to speak for Dallas, but for him, it was never about a diet. It was about an experiment, right? For 30 days, just see how good you could feel. Just understand what the food choices you're doing each day are doing to you. Just see what happens when you eliminate certain things, what your life is like, your energy, your sleep, your libido, your mood, right? Just observe. And then afterwards, let's figure out how to kind of integrate the things that you want into your life. It's not meant to be a kind of, oh, this is Whole30 approved, this is not Whole30 approved. You know, and it's really interesting that I think diets can work if you use them as self-experimentation to go, oh, is this way of eating compatible with me, my ethical beliefs, my cultural beliefs, and my lifestyle? Because frankly, if it ain't, you're going to find it hard to follow in the long term. So it's, you know, the point is, mate, you can go and look at studies, right? So I am diet agnostic, right? I believe, and I don't like the term low carb diet because I think we're denigrating a macronutrient in the way that we did the same thing for fat. So, but it's not that I don't think they can work. You know, when I helped put that lady into remission from her type 2 diabetes on Doctor in the House, I used what would be called conventionally a low carb diet. Now, I don't use that term, so I don't like it. And I think it's, here, see, I love simplicity, right? And here's the clash for me. Can you be simplistic and also true to the science? And that's hard to do sometimes, because when you simplify, sometimes you lose the factual accuracy. But I think one of the reasons low carb diets are so successful for certain people is it's a very simple message. Okay, carbs are the problem. I cut down carbs. Boom. This is what happens. And I think, you know, really, I think it comes down to ultra processed foods. I think that's the main problem in society because they make you eat more. They are energy dense and nutrient poor. So you eat them, you don't feel satisfied. You want to eat more of it. It affects the hormone leptin in the brain, and it makes you want to eat more of these things. There's addictive-like qualities to them. You know, I sort of go through all of that in the book. But the point is that if you go on a low-carb diet, most of the junk in our food supply are highly processed carbs. So actually, people who go on a low-carb diet, is it the fact that they've cut the carbs, or is it the fact, or is the bigger factor that they've cut out most of the highly processed junk, right? Because there are societies in Japan, like Okinawa, where they have 80% carbs, right? And they are healthy. They're not overweight. They're not insulin resistant. They're not type 2 diabetic. They live to 100, right? In really good health. So we can't say it's just the carbs, but it could be carbs in the context of our Western lifestyles, right? So there is complexity there, but there's also simplicity. So you can have a trial on, there's something called the Broad Study, right? One of the best studies I've seen on nutrition and weight loss. And it was a whole food plant-based diet. Some of the best 6-month results. And the point I'm trying to make, without getting too, I don't want to be confusing, the conclusion is different diets work for different people. Just because your best mate lost weight on a keto diet, right, and is thriving on it, great for your mates. It may be brilliant for your friend, but that may not be the right approach for you.
To the people listening now that could be lost, depressed, aimless, what would your advice be to sort of get back up?
First of all, nothing lasts in life. So when you know that, when you realize that, it's actually a great remedy. It's great therapy, because you know that the anger that I woke up with this morning, tomorrow it will be gone. So COVID will be gone. We tend to think that what's happening now is just going to go on forever. All right. So the world is going to change. It's going to revolve, and the next step is going to happen. And possibly it will be a very exciting and very weird world that we're all entering, where all kinds of businesses have been destroyed, business models have evaporated, the entertainment, the travel industry decimated, but people are going to be hungry for some kind of experience. They're going to be hungry to get out of their apartments and actually do something, right? So it's going to be a moment of tremendous opportunity. I mean, the last time, which was even stronger, was in 1918. We had in the States, I don't know if it was a worldwide phenomenon, so I'm sorry, my ignorance, but we had the Spanish flu here. Did that also affect England? Do you know?
I don't know. The H1N1 pandemic. Yeah, I'm not sure if it did. Forgive me too. I have no idea.
Okay.
Sorry to my audience.
Well, it was very powerful in the United States, and then we had just come out of World War I, which was much more extreme for England, with the millions of young men who were butchered. But it's still in the United States, you know. So the feeling was, God damn it, I want to live. I don't want any of this stuff on my shoulders. I'm tired of all this shit. I'm tired of all this weariness. The Roaring Twenties, F. Scott Fitzgerald, the Flappers, jazz music, wildness. That's what we're going to probably be facing. Our own Roaring Twenties as we now enter this decade, or we're in this decade, right? And we've finally gotten rid of Donald Trump. Sorry for that aside. And we can live and we can breathe again, and the world is, you know, resuming its natural colors. So it's going to be a very exciting period that's coming up, right? But what's going to hold you back is your attitude, because you've been having this year of kind of either working to improve yourself and being kind of active, or you're going to be sort of passive, which is what we were just talking about before. You're going to be fearful. You're going to be afraid that any day now, this career that I had is going to be gone. And so I better just grab any job that I can. You're going to become cautious and conservative. I can remember my own parents. My mother is still alive. They grew up in the Great Depression. And I was born in 1959, but they were, you know, it was the 50s, the 60s, where things were like really happening and exciting and money was everywhere. They were still had that Depression era mentality where you had to save every penny. You had to be worried about everything that you bought. But why? You don't need to. They couldn't get rid of that habit. And there are going to be a lot of young people in the world who are now in the similar period, who are going to have developed that cautious gene in them, where they're going to be afraid of life. They're going to be afraid of challenges. They're going to be afraid of putting money at risk and trying something that's a little bit challenging. And it's just like you're fucking yourself if that's what you do. You need to get rid of those fears. And that's what you should be working on right this moment, because in 6 months, it's going to be like an insane amount of opportunity. It's going to be a Lollapalooza out there. There's going to be so much things that you can create, so many new businesses, so many new ideas. You don't want to miss the boat because you've developed all these negative behavior patterns.
It's a question that I fear is going to keep changing and changing over time, the answer to the question. And the other day I was watching the YouTube channel of a guy from my side of the pond who's a lot of his missions align with your own, is Russell Brand. And he was dissecting Elon Musk's Neuralink presentation. And he was sort of talking about how, you know, this is essentially challenging what it means to be human. Do you fear for the future of human nature when you see something like Neuralink, which is essentially, it's trying to, I guess, change what it is to be a human?
There's definitely concern. I mean, number one, experimenting on animals for what purpose is no good. Like, just from that human rights perspective, who are you to start shoving things into a sentient being's brain and playing them like a video game? So you know, that aside, which is not anything to blow off. Yeah, I mean, we don't even know what the hell is going on anyway. You know, we just barely understand the microbiome. We have no clue what's going on in the virome. You know, when you have 10 to the 31, that means 10 with 31 zeros after it, of viruses that are in our air interacting with us at every second of every day right now. And then you have 10 to the 30 in our soil and 10 to the 31 in our water. We have no idea what the mystery of this, and any person who thinks that they have, like, so my whole thing is, listen, I love finding compounds and fruits and botanicals and I love finding that stuff and finding your way for optimization and better brain health and body health and functioning. I love that. We all love that, for sure. We want to function better as people, but not at the detriment of undermining the foundations of who and what we are. And so we don't even know what's going on. We don't even need to, there's only 2.5%. I'm gonna pick on us here on this side of the pond. There's 2.5% people. So some research done by Dr. Furman, 2.5% people of the 330 million people in America, only 2.5% are deemed healthy, right? So what are we doing? We are so far beyond optimal. We have a lot of work to do. We have yet to come even close to optimizing ourselves in congruence with the biorhythms of the earth, the sun, the stars, the water, the oceans, the microbes, the viruses, relationships. We are so bloody behind. I think we should double down on all of that stuff. Stop eating toxic food, eliminating toxic exposure in our environments and deodorants and hormone disrupting laundry detergents and Teflon in your dental floss and aluminum leaching into your liquids and plastic leaching into your food, destroying your endocrine system, which is the master commander of your entire body. Why do you think people aren't feeling well? So the idea, that's a snippet, the idea of cutting open your brain and shoving in a mechanism that can be controlled by someone else or something else or some freaking weird ass AI is absolutely, utterly ridiculous and insane when you look back at all of the other ways that we are intimately and effectively failing at being great humans. So let's be great humans. Like, let's stop this stupid ass insanity and let's try that. So that's the world that I would like to create.
Mm.
And you know, it's, you know, sovereignty of our liberties, our inalienable rights, water, power, food, shelter. Let's get people free. Let's let people be free. Let's be effective at getting everyone clean water. Let's be effective at letting people and supporting people growing their own food. Let's be effective at decentralizing water. There's a lot of ways to get water. Let's decentralize. Let's get water to people that don't have it. Let's decentralize power systems. You know, the wind can blow here in fire season. They just turn off the power. So now a bunch of people like at 80, like what, 30 degrees plus centigrade, they're dying and sweating in their houses. They've spent millions of dollars on their house, and the centralized unit just turns their power off. Like, it's insane. Like, so anyway, these are great questions. It just gets me going, because it's like, when you just look at these things from a logical point of view, we're failing as humans. The UN goals, like, great, they have goals, but they're largely failing. Like, I've been out in the middle of nowhere. People don't have water. There's kids dying. I've seen kids dying. Like, it's bad. We're failing. So, but we can do a lot. We can do a lot. But we can't rely on people that have been in these systems and largely have nothing to show for it. Or just, it's just a marketing ploy or a political ploy or whatever. I think we need just great, strong people coming together to create new systems, because systems are failing us and systems are going to get us out of it. So there you go.
I take the same walk to the gym every day. It takes me about 20, 25 minutes. I walk there, walk back. So you're looking, 40 minutes, maybe an hour walking a day on total. Okay. So I live in Wales in the UK, very scenic country, loads of hills, loads of trees, loads of plants. And my walk to work is quite quite a beautiful walk. So you're walking through this wooded area. So I'm walking through all these trees, this lovely scenery. But on my walk, I've noticed, and I only really noticed after I read this book, is that I'm not there. It's almost like I'm not there on the walk. My body's moving, but my mind's thinking, okay, we got this next week, there's this next month, where am I going to be in 2 years' time? And then all of a sudden I'm on a tangent and I'm going back to the past. So I'm in the future, I'm in the past, but I'm not appreciating this quite lovely walk that I'm on. I'm not appreciating what's happening right now. And I know a lot of people would travel to see, scenery like we've got over here. And I just not appreciating it, because my mind's just racing to the future, worrying about things that I have no control over right now. And this is what Naval talks about this in the book. He says a very small percentage of your brain is focused on the present, most of it's on the future and the past, and that you can literally destroy your happiness if you spend all your time living in delusions of the future. So what can we do? How can we be a bit more conscious of remaining present?
I think it's a muscle. It's an instant. It's like it's a practice, I guess. And you're going to fail at it a lot, and it takes a long time, but you can build, and Naval talks about this, is like, he trained himself to become happier, and like train in the same sense that somebody like trains in the gym. You identify like a movement or a habit or something that you need to change in order to become happier, like what you're talking about, of like appreciating the present moment and creating either a trigger or a mantra or just the instinct to do it, and reminding yourself to do it as often as you can. I think there's a lot of practices that can help, like, gratitude, or like, I think having a daily walk is like very, very helpful. And if that triggers it for you to like take a deep breath and like appreciate the trees and the scene, that's good. You're never going to reach 100% of this, but it's and it's helpful. I think it's helpful to know that it's hard work, right? Like, to say that happiness is a choice just seems sort of trite, and it makes it seem like anytime you're not choosing happiness, you're failing, and it's hard work, right? It like, you're never going to be perfectly in the moment. There's, you know, monks who meditate for decades and like still fail at this regularly, and I don't think that's the goal. But I think you know, some of the happiest people are the people who trained themselves to appreciate and to be grateful and to bring themselves into that present moment just more often than people who don't.
Is heaven utopia, or is it something different?
Well, heaven is a complicated concept, and so you could say that heaven is the hierarchy of beings itself, right? It's the hierarchy of values. That's what heaven is. It's the invisible patterns which call us to the good, right? And so heaven is that which makes you recognize that it's a good apple. And and I say it like not even in a moral sense, but there's also a moral sense, which is that you recognize what is good, okay? Those patterns that are actually, you could say, extensions of God. We call them the logos of the world, the logi, the different aspects of God which are upholding reality. That's what heaven is. And so the human person is, the idea that we go to heaven is a really distorted idea about how this works, how all of this works. The idea is that we're actually meant to embody heaven, you could say.
Yes.
Right. So it's not the idea that we go to heaven, although you could say that in a colloquial way, but the idea is rather that we're meant to embody heaven. That is, we're meant to, in manifest form, you know, manifest these higher things, right? So embody these higher values. And those are virtues, right? Those are, when you become virtuous, you are going to heaven, or you're ascending the mountain is a way to understand it. You're actually ascending the mountain of being, and then you come to a place where you meet God and you have an epiphany where all of a sudden the being, you know, the infinite of God manifests itself to you in that place where all the virtues come together, all the hierarchies of beings kind of come together. So that is, right, that is the spiritual transformation that we're called to engage in. And so that would be what people colloquially talk about, going to heaven. But one of the problems, like you said, is that it's become so vulgar that people think that it's like you die and you go to heaven, and it's like, it doesn't mean anything. It has sadly stopped to have meaning. But if you read Dante, if you read anything that is before the 18th century, then you'll get a good understanding of what that means, like of what this transformation is.
There was an incident recently. There was a protest in England, the Bristol riots or the Bristol protests, in which the police were attacked. It's all underneath this defund the police idea, and it took place in Bristol. And you know, the basic facts were that these Antifa, or whatever you'd like to label them, protesters, were attacking police vehicles, there's footage of it. But then I was on Twitter and I saw these really artistic pictures with this poetic language, and it sort of switched the narrative, and suddenly the police were the bad guys. And it just got me thinking back to, you know, it's that thing that Jonathan Haidt always talks about, that emotions, they control thinking now. Have words become more powerful than fact these days?
Yes, at least short term. Whoever controls the narrative, whoever tells the best story is the winner. I will say though that you know, one of the cool things about all this is that there are people like you, young people, who are reading great thinkers, and there's a great deal of pushback. I mean, you and I are having conversations about really thoughtful people like Jonathan Haidt, you know, and we're mentioning people like Foucault and Derrida. These people, you know, this was all academic fringe shit. And now you've got a lot of people all over the world, man, kind of like mounting a defense against this. So there's a lot of pushback because people are inherently, intuitively, just uncomfortable with this. It doesn't make sense. You want to defund the police, huh? The police are the bad guys? Okay. All right. Do you know what violence looks like? Because most of those people don't seem to really know what violence. I mean, if you want to do that, and if you really think the police are the bad guys, every society has to figure out a way to, first of all, a couple of questions. Who has the monopoly on violence? You need someone to have the monopoly on violence. Otherwise, it breaks into warlords. I mean, if you really want to defund the police, if you're really serious about getting rid of the police, then take a look at Somalia. Take a trip in some of these countries, Afghanistan, in Waziristan stuff. See what happens. I mean, things will find their own way. There will be order, but it'll probably be like in Seattle, a rapper who's got his militia and his guns in that zone that cops weren't allowed in, which was so disgraceful, fucking disgraceful. Really? All right. All those businesses, you guys want to take over an area? Get the fuck out of here. So I think it's a fantasy. So see, so much of this crazy stuff, from critical race theory to defund the police, it's not applicable. It's just, it will burn out, or it will readjust to a thing you don't like. My buddy said, I said, what do you think about this critical race theory and all this postmodernism? And my buddy said, he goes, well, I would say it's exactly like invading Vietnam. Remember when the communists were going to take over Vietnam and then the rest of the world? So we got to go all the way over there and fight those terrible communists, because if we don't get them in Vietnam, they'll be at our shores in no time. So a lot of this might be, you and me and a bunch of us might be just paranoid and shadow boxing at something that's impossible to apply anyway. It's just not going to take root. Gender neutral bathrooms. What the fuck? Well, okay, now I go to the bathroom and it has a triangle and it says gender neutral. I don't give a fuck. I'm in a restaurant. All right. What do you want to put gender neutral? I got to take a piss. I don't give a shit. A lot of this stuff, critical race theory, you have to apologize for your whiteness and you have to be a white abolitionist. All right. My mom's white, so fuck off. I like my mom. I ain't doing that shit. All right, what do you want me to do? Where do I sign? It was like, so we used to have to take sexual harassment workshops when you're in Hollywood and you're doing a TV show. There's a sexual harassment workshop. And guess what? Nobody really took it. They'd have a piece of paper you would have to sign, but somehow the workshop never showed up. Somehow you're like, well, I gotta do unconscious bias training. Really? Okay, so at work, you who took some classes in university are going to teach all of us how to be that we are unconsciously biased. Really? It's like my joke. I need my fucking unconscious bias. If you have a face tattoo, I don't care how good a person you are, you're never babysitting my kids. Okay? You understand? It's like, that's how it is. So I need if you got shifty eyes and clammy hands, I'm not getting in the car with you. I'm not getting in your Uber, especially if it's a van with no windows. We chunk information. You're not going to get rid of my unconscious bias. It's a cute idea, but again, it's going to be what these people do is come up with things that are a nuisance that the rest of us that are living in the real world can't apply at the level of detail. My bigger concern is that they get to our children. They're trying to rewrite history. They're trying to indoctrinate our children into the idea that the West and everything it stands for is evil, racist, and colonialist, and all that stuff. And they dismiss the West with a couple of words, which is just ridiculous. And they're using words and they're mounting their arguments with words that were invented by the West, that were fought for by the West, that were argued for by the West. Feminism, individualism, humanism. So, they're very inconsistent. They just are. They're very inconsistent. And if you want to be a Marxist, okay, dude. I mean, if you could just point to one example in history, I'll wait, where it even worked a little bit. Again, look, for anybody who believes in socialism and collectivism and Marxism, look, all good. And this is for any academic and everything else. I'm sure they've turned this off by now, but like, there are only so many seats at the front of the plane. Okay. Everybody loves a first class seat. Everybody would rather be in first class in that big plush seat over seat 38E in the middle near to the bathroom at the back of the, you know, I don't care. Woke hates that as much as MAGA does. So liberal hates that just as much as conservative does. At the end of the day, you know, you're not everybody gets a seat at the front of the fucking plane. Not everybody has an oceanside view. There isn't that much to go around. And so whether or not you have a communist government or a right-wing government, there are going to be people that are going to figure out a way to game the system to get what they want, or at least to get it for their kids. It's how this aggressive, competitive ape called a human being does it, and has always and always will do it. You are not going to come up with a system that makes everybody, gives everybody a first-class ticket. You can give everybody seat 38E. That's typically what happens. You turn the whole plane into a shit show with no seats and everybody's fighting just to sit on the floor. That's what happens. I mean, if you want to make everybody equal, you can make everybody miserable and poor. That's what history suggests. But these people that I'm mentioning history, and those people don't read history. They just don't. They don't. You know, so I don't know, you know, so communism, do I have to say it? It doesn't work. It doesn't work. Communist societies became just as unequal in a lot of ways as any capitalist society, only they were just unequally poor. At least we live in societies where you have a chance to make your money. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is fucking like 101 shit.
What is the psychology of someone that is addicted to something? What is the psychology of that?
Well, I mean, the fundamental psychology is that this pleasure pain balance, which is in a very primitive part of our brain, you know, in the limbic brain or the emotion brain, deep in the brainstem, phylogenetically conserved over millions of years of evolution, unchanged across species. It's the same, that part of our brain is exactly the same as it is in the lizard, right? It's the lizard brain. And it's a very powerful mechanism. And it essentially, you know, in the process of becoming addicted, gets a life of its own. And when we're in it, we don't see it. So whether it's me with my romance novels or you literally climbing mountains, you get so that you don't even you're not able to observe objectively anymore. I mean, it sounds like you had some self-awareness, but I wonder if that was while you were climbing Everest or while you were in Nepal, or if it was really later after you looked back. And my guess would be that it was really later, that it took a break from doing that for you to be able to fully see kind of the mind state that you were in. But what essentially happens is that our lizard brain or our reward pathway ends up being the sole driver of our motivations and our choices, and becomes, you know, probably literally disconnected from the prefrontal cortex, which is that, you know, big gray matter region right behind our foreheads that's so important for future planning, decision-making, storytelling. Now, when things are working out healthily, our prefrontal cortex and our reward pathway and our limbic brain are talking to each other. And there's quite a lot of, you know, back and forth. And, well, you know, I tried this and I had this experience, but then I had these consequences. And so maybe that's not a good idea to do that again, or what, you know, whatever it is. But when we get in our addictions, those connections with the prefrontal cortex essentially get cut off, and we're just in lizard brain, and just, you know, being guided by the reflexive pull of our desires, which essentially, again, ultimately leads to a pleasure pain balance tilted to the side of pain. So we're now driven to pursue our drug of choice, because when we're not doing it, we're craving and we're irritable and we're anxious and we're depressed. We need to keep doing it just to feel normal.
Do you think that, I guess, someone with these addictive compulsions, that they have a mindset of kind of like, maybe this world is too mundane, or there's just too much drudgery in modern life? Do you think that that's possible?
Oh, absolutely. So, I mean, as I talk about in the book, one of the big problems contributing to compulsive overconsumption for all of us is not just the ubiquity, potency, and novelty of addictive drugs and behaviors, but also the fact that we have so much more time and we really don't know what to do with it. You know, not only do we have more days because we are living longer, but we also have more time in any given day. We have more leisure time than humans have ever had before. We have approximately 4 hours of leisure time compared to 2 hours of leisure time 100 years ago. And we're projected to have up to 7 or 8 hours of leisure time in rich countries, you know, in the near future. So it really does beg the question, you know, what do we do with all this time? So far, it looks like what we're doing is entertaining ourselves to death, which is not working out very well for us. And I think we're going to have to rethink that. But it is a big problem. And I think in particular, people who are vulnerable to addiction are people who may find this world especially boring, and are people who just temperamentally need more friction and need more of a challenge in life. And if they can't find it, then the addictive process sort of fills that vacuum for them.
We talked earlier, we mentioned about you reading old books, and obviously we've just, well, we're in the middle, we're going through this pandemic, and I referenced the fact that you read books from years gone by. You went back to Marcus. I know he went through his own pandemic. What did you take from, Marcus's experience, and did that help in any way in your own way in dealing with the pandemic?
For sure. I mean, I think a big one was like the Antonine Plague lasted for like 15 years. So it's sort of like a buckle up, this is going to last a while, right? I think that was a big thing that I took out of it. It'll be over eventually, but if you think it's going to be soon, you're setting yourself up to be disappointed. I would rather buckle up, be ready for the long haul, and be pleasantly surprised that it was over sooner than the other way around. So that was a big lesson. The part that hit me the most from meditations, Marcus Aurelius says, there's two kinds of plagues. He's like, there's one that destroys your life, and then there's the one that destroys your character. And I've been very cognizant and aware of the ways in which people I know, people I like, people I admire have been made worse by the pandemic. Became less compassionate to other people, more susceptible to misinformation and disinformation, more selfish, more ignorant about certain things, right? And I mean, I even noticed this with my own, chunks of my own audience, and you interact with these people and you go, oh, you caught something, and you can almost feel it when it happens, right? You'll be talking to someone you've known for a long time. Everything seems normal. You seem like you're all in agreement, and then they sort of drop something. Like, but what about okay, so you got infected, huh? And we see this with American politics right now as well. It's like the word they use for is being red pilled, right? And you'll watch someone who was otherwise a totally normal, upstanding member of society just start kind of going down this rabbit hole, and you just watch what it does. You watch how they get warped, and it starts with one thing, and then all of a sudden, it's like it's again exactly like a virus. First you get the one symptom, then you get the other symptom, and now you got all of them, right? And so that was a big thing that I took out of it. It's like, how do you emerge from this? Not like, I'd rather get COVID than that, right? Like, I'll probably survive COVID. I'm young, I'm in good health, but I have good medical care, etc. But like, I don't know how you come back from the conspiratorial rabbit hole. I haven't seen that happen much.
Was there a specific fight in your career that you personally think that you learned the most from?
Yes, my 2 losses, and especially my second one. And I'm going to explain. My first losses, I was fighting Matthews, who was like a legend in the sport. I was going into that fight not to win. I was going into that fight not losing, because I didn't really believe in my chance. Yeah. Then after, when I lost the fight, I look at the fight and I realized I was doing pretty well. And I was thinking, I was like, man, I could have beat that guy. That's why when I fought him the second and third time, I crushed him, because I was a different person, not only physically, but mentally. Then I became champion. When I beat Matthews, I was like the new kids on the block. Everybody told me how good I was, and I start to believe my own hype. I really believe I never been rugged before that. I never got hurt, so I start to think that I was invincible. And all these things start to get into my head. Oh, I'm the new thing. Even Dana White was like, hey, you're my hitman. So I start to believe in it. And then I was fighting the guy, Matt Serra, who barely made it. Barely wins the Ultimate Fighter final fight. He won in a split decision, I believe. So I didn't really see him as a threat. So I remember when I fought him, you know, mentally, I felt like it's probably the only night that I sleep well before a fight. It's my fight with Matt Serra, my first fight with Matt Serra. I slept kind of well the night before the fight. And I lost that fight by TKO. And I remember thinking, I'm like, man, I'm never going to make the same mistake again. When I fought Matt Serra, he cut me with a looping punch right behind the ear, and I got dizzy. But I always thought that it was impossible for me to get knocked out, that I was kind of invincible. So I tried to give him back right away, you know, to get back into a slugfest right away, which is a crazy mistake. When you get rocked, you need to recompose, to recuperate. But I did not. I wanted to keep going and give it back to him. I got emotional, and I lost. I got punched many times. I had to tap out. I lost. I tap out because I didn't want people, they blame me because, oh, he's not a real fighter. He tap out on strike. A lot of fighters said that about me. But I don't think it's a bad thing. I tap out because I can't. I'm a grown man. I can admit when I'm beaten. And then I didn't want to take unnecessary brain damage. So I tap out. You win this one. Maybe next time it will be my turn, you know? So if I would not have done that, maybe I would have cerebral damage that will not allow me to come back as good for the next time. So what I did is, after my fight with Serra, I identified the problem why I lost. I believe I kind of underestimate him. And then I realized that every fight I should train like it's the most important fight of my life. Like the guy in front of me, the up-and-comer, is the most dangerous guy. And Matt Serra's, what happened with Matt Serra, it became like my worst nightmare. I never wanted to happen ever again. You know, I was humiliated. It's my worst humiliation. I think it's one of the biggest upset, I believe, in the UFC history. It was like 11-1, the odds in Vegas. So when I had my rematch against Matt Serra, I beat him and I performed very well. But that experience I had with Matt Serra, I remember when I fought Carlos Condit, I got kicked in the head and I got dropped on my butt. I got knocked down. And I had a flashback of what happened with Matt Serra. What happened with Matt Serra, when I got dizzy, I wanted to go back into the slugfest immediately. But when I got kicked against Carlos Condit, I fall back. And I remember what happened with Matt Serra, the mistake that I did into that fight. And I told myself, because if I would have tried to stand up right away and get back into the fight, I would have probably got knocked out. So I step on my ego. I accept the fact that I got hurt. I took what we call the guard position on the floor, weather the storm, you know, of the punches. I recuperate, and then I came back and I won the fight. So the loss that I had with Matt Serra, it's probably the reason why I won my fight against Carlos Condit, because I made the mistake once and I never made it again.
And on that thread then of relationships, obviously you and your husband Jordan have had a long relationship. You've been through a lot together. I've heard Jordan on podcasts and interviews be brought to tears when talking about your relationship and the love that you have. What do you think the core principles of a happy and healthy relationship are?
Well, when Jordan first asked me to marry him, he told me that if we didn't tell the truth, our relationship couldn't work. And so that was going to be, and that was when he was 25, something like that. So that was the first thing, that we were to tell the truth. And I hadn't really understood what that meant. I first took that to mean my truth in what, the truth in my relationships, what I'm, where my goals are, to make sure that that was all truthful. So that was the first, so honesty was paramount. And he still talks about that as being very, very important. And so that is what got us started and really took us through. The other thing was that if there was a problem, we didn't just let it go. It might have taken 3 days in the beginning to uncover what was happening, because we both were pretty strong-headed and probably didn't really want to admit that we had done anything to cause the trouble. So in the early days, but we didn't give up on it. He was very good at, even though he doesn't like conflict, he's a very soft-hearted, very compassionate person, as you can tell through his public image. He's a very compassionate person, but he would, and knowing that this would be uncomfortable, he would still insist that we talk about it until we understood it. And that was really good. We got through a lot of trouble by perseverance. And you know, at the end of every mystery in the rosary, you pretty much pray for perseverance. It's all about trying again and getting up and trying again and getting up and trying again, no matter what.
Logic, reason, mathematics would probably suggest to us that there's no such thing as the one. But I think everyone in relationships, they like to think there's a one. They want to find their one. And I think taking that logic and mathematic hat off, I like to believe in the one. So how did you know that your husband was the one?
Well, we were very close friends. We enjoyed each other's company when we were kids. I thought he was smart back then. He was fascinating to be around. He had different ways of looking at things and dissecting problems. And, you know, when we were really little, we played with a chemistry set. You know, we liked that, and he really liked that. And I got to be a part of that. He taught me how to play chess when I was a little kid. That was really great. And I was 5 years younger than my siblings, so I didn't really grow up with my family. I grew up with my friends, and he was one of the friends that I grew up with. And I never got tired of being with him. And then when I left home when I was 18 and didn't really see him that much until I was in my 20s or my mid-20s. And he called me and had moved within a couple of hours of where I lived when we were in our 20s. And I went to visit him, and he was getting his PhD. So it looked like he was getting his life together. He was taking responsibility for himself and moving forward. And I thought, you know, if I don't marry him, I won't know what happens in his life as I do now. And so if I want to know what happens in his life, I'll have to marry him in order to be there. And, you know, his dad was my school teacher. he was a good father. So I thought Jordan would be a good father, and he was interesting, and I wanted to be with somebody who was interesting. And so that's how I decided to marry him. He told his dad in grade 5 that he was going to marry me. So he decided a very long time ago. And I don't know when I learned that. I wasn't that young when I learned that. So it wasn't something that I knew about. But he was always there, you know, even when I wasn't seeing him, when I was going home. I lived in Montreal and I was going home to Northern Alberta at Christmas. And his family lived in this little town too. When I got home, it was so often that he would come to see me that I would know within a half an hour of getting home that he would knock on my door. So he was a constant friend. So he was not easily gotten rid of, I'd say. By the time I wanted to marry him, he was getting pretty popular with the women. So I thought I better marry him quick.
You had to make your move quick.
That's right.
Oh, that's beautiful.